All right, boys. BettrMMA is back, and we are bringing you guys picks for UFC Fight Night Tuivasa versus Tybura. Now, this is going to be one of the weaker fight nights of the year simply because it is coming right after 299. So they kind of scheduled a lot of talent to be on that 299 card. So this card is looking a little light. But nonetheless, let's hope the fights are good because that is one thing that always rings true about most UFC Fight Night cards is that even though the matchups might not scream good fights, you might end up getting some bangers. So we'll start this off with Chad Anheleger versus Charlamos Grigoriou. Charlamos Grigoriou. I don't know anything about Charlamos. I believe it's his UFC debut. But Chad Anheleger seems to be the definition of the bottom tier of the bantamweight division. He is a bottom feeder if there ever was one. 12-7 looks like a sensible record for the skill set that Chad Anheleger has. Not very skilled, doesn't seem to possess any sort of real threatening skills himself, seems to have a very low IQ when it comes to fight-making decisions to get himself into a finishing position or to avoid danger. That's what I've seen in his past fights, which were with Jose Johnson. Jose Johnson himself is a very low IQ fighter, and I think Chad Anheleger had a lot of chances to win that fight if he just kept to a game plan, but he wasn't able to do that. So I think Charlamos Grigoriou is going to get the W here. He sounds like a guy who could be in the UFC. Charlamos Grigoriou. That sounds like a guy in the UFC. Thiago Moises versus Mitch Ramirez. I'm really disappointed that Thiago Moises couldn't fight Brad Riddell, which he was scheduled to fight. I felt like that would have been an awesome fight to watch. But Thiago Moises, man, he's fought some great competition. He's fought Islam Makhachev. I believe he has fought Bobby Green as well, Bobby King Green, if I'm not mistaken. But he has fought Benoit Saint Denis, lost in that fight, as we know. But still, good fighter. Submission of Christo Giagos in the first round. Lost to Islam Makhachev. He's beaten Alex Hernandez. Lost to Jose Alvarez, which was a very tough fight. And yes, he has a decision win over Bobby King Green and a second round submission over Michael Johnson. But so Thiago Moises is a very underrated fighter in the lightweight division, I would say. He's still only 28 years old, so he's kind of had his rough patches in his UFC career already. I would expect that this would be the time where he should start, getting his ish together in the cage and getting his mind right so he can really go out there and perform and set a pace and really have a performance that will impress people and say, whoa, Thiago Moises is here to stay and he is a force to be reckoned with. This Mitch Ramirez guy, he's making his UFC debut. Don't know anything about him. He's 8-1, but Thiago Moises, I believe, has fought high level enough competition and has been in this UFC game long enough to where he is going to pull out the win here, especially after he was expecting a tougher opponent like Brad Riddell. I think he's going to go out there hungry to finish this guy. Moving on, Josiane Amorim versus Corey McKenna. I don't care. Moving on to Joshua Coulibaugh versus Danny Silva. Joshua Coulibaugh has a very weird body type, and from what I've seen of him, he sort of seems to gas, which is kind of weird. He seems like the body type to where you would think, like, if anything, he would have great cardio, but he doesn't even have great cardio. So I'm going to go with Danny Silva in this fight. I just think the guy looks better fit, in better shape. He's 27 years old, 8-1, And let's see, he's also making his UFC debut. So I expect Danny Silva to be the young, hungry fighter. They're giving him Joshua Kulibao, who is not the most impressive fighter jumping off the page to you. So I'm going to go Danny Silva in this fight. Next up, we got Rafael Filho versus Ode Osborne. Now, this is very interesting because you have Rafael Filho, who I think could potentially get Ode to the ground and submit him. Ode is 32 years old now. Let's see, Ode's last fight was against Asur Almabayev, and Asur got the win there. Shout out to Asu. And then he got a win over Charles Johnson, which I hear is quite, which I hear the MMA guru disagrees with. But I can't remember much from that fight, so I don't really have an opinion either way. But let's see here. Knocked out by Tyson Nam, knocked out Adeshev, beat Vergara in a decision, and then got knocked out by Manel Cap. I mean, Ode Osborne is a very on-off fighter. Let's see here about Rafael Filho. 30 years old. Last fight was a first-round submission against Daniel Perez. Okay. And then his first fight was against Muhammad Mokaev. Okay. You know, I'm going to go with Rafael Filho in this fight, simply off of his momentum in his UFC career. Ode Osborne is a very coin flip type of fighter, if you will, and Rafael Filho was jumped into the UFC right up against, his first matchup was against Muhammad Mokaev. So that is a very competitive matchup for anybody in the 125-pound division. And so, of course, it gave him that mentality coming into the second fight that he's got to go out there and finish this guy. And that's what he does in his second fight in the UFC. He gets a first-round submission. So I think Rafael Filho is going to get his left foot in front of the other, or get his other foot in front of the other, and start a good momentum to his UFC career. Because at the end of the day, Ode Osborne is a good athlete, but I don't think he is a UFC-level fighter at the end of the day. I think it's a combination of skill and mental strength. He isn't simply there to put all the pieces together to really string a few fights together. I hope Ode proves me wrong, because he has the potential to be very exciting, but some people have it, some people don't. I do not think Ode Osborne has it. Ever since he memed himself with his debut, saying that everybody's going to say that Conor McGregor was on the Ode Osborne card. He totally memed himself for life in MMA history, and he cemented himself as that guy who said that. And if I'm not mistaken, let me check that right now. Yeah, he lost that fight. That was against Brian Boom Kelleher. He lost that fight. So that is who Ode Osborne is to me in MMA history. The guy who debuted on the Conor McGregor card at UFC 246, Conor versus Donald Cerrone, and he got submitted by Brian Kelleher. Shout out to Brian Kelleher, OG of the game. So I got Rafael Filho. Next up, we have Josiane Nunes versus Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler gave us a hilarious meme the last time she fought. I hope she does the exact same thing, because Josiane Nunes goes out there to crack. So yeah, Josiane Nunes is going to win this fight. Next up, Natan Levy versus Mike Davis. Mike Davis just takes 2 years off every time before he fights. He's 31 years old now. Natan Levy is 32 years old. Mike Davis has a slight reach and height advantage. Mike Davis, let's see, he's coming off of a win over Vyacheslav Borshev, and that is a very good win at the end of the day. I'll have to really rewatch that fight to see how he went about winning that fight, but I do like Vyacheslav, so I give him a lot of credit for winning that fight. Natan Levy, let's see any of his fights. Well, I don't like his name, that's for sure. He's been in a lot of canceled bouts, and his last win was against Gennaro Valdez, and Mike Breeden. So bottom level competition. And then he lost to Rafael Garcia, who's bottom level competition. So I will go Mike Davis in this matchup. And I'm going to rewatch that Borshev fight because Borshev is a pretty good fighter. So I'm going to go Mike Davis in this fight. Next up, we got GM3, Gerald Meerschaert versus Brian Barberena. Now, Gerald Meerschaert is the classic jiu-jitsu bro. And to be a jiu-jitsu bro at middleweight is very, very funny. Because it's like, bro, you know you're getting hit by middleweights, right? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you know that you are just a jiu-jitsu guy, right? And they're like, yeah. And then you're like, you're like, how does your face feel? And they're like, give me an ice pack, or wake me up, or, you know. So Gerald Meerschaert just lives a very funny life, in my opinion. I think it's just great that he is the middleweight submission leader, if I'm not mistaken. Good for GM3, man. Brian Barberena hates dieting. He has no desire to get in good physical shape. And he should not be fighting at middleweight. I do not see him having any advantages in this fight. Not even in cardio. Simply because Gerald Meerschaert has pretty decent cardio. So I'm going to go Gerald Meerschaert in this fight by submission. Penny Kianzad versus Macy Chiasson. I think Macy Chiasson, who really cares? But Christian Rodriguez versus Isaac Dalgarian. There's a lot of questions around Christian Rodriguez. And I think those questions are going to lead to Isaac Dalgarian surprising everybody. Isaac Dalgarian surprised me against, Francis Marshall. Francis Marshall is not the most outstanding prospect, but he was associated with the Frank Shamrock team, if I'm not mistaken. Francis Marshall was a decent enough contender, and a decent enough young contender, and Isaac Dalgarian pretty much went in there in the first round and took care of him like it was easy business. First round knockout, or first round KO, TKO. It was via ground and pound, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Isaac Dalgarian has a very good, well-rounded game. He's very hungry. The dude lives in a van, and he's kind of gotten a little buzz around him because of that. But I like Isaac Dalgarian. I think he has a lot of potential, and I think he's a lot more hungry than Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez has lost weight a lot of times, so he's kind of gotten this mentality where it's like he's okay with throwing away a certain percentage of his purse. And I don't think Isaac Dalgarian has that same sort of mentality. And if we're talking about a fight, which includes the battle of the mental, I'm going to take Isaac Dalgarian in this fight. Isaac Dalgarian. Light heavyweight, Oben St. Preux versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. Very interesting fight because Ovens is almost like the older version of Kennedy in a sense. Not in that they're the exact same type of fighter exactly, but they're very similar framed, and they're going to be contenders to gatekeepers in this light heavyweight division for some time. It's a passing of the torch fight, if you will. Oben St. Preux has shown a tendency in his last few fights, especially in his loss against Jamal Hill and in his loss against Philippe Lins, that once you get him at the end of your strikes, you're essentially got him right where you want him. It's very hard for OSP to start cutting angles, using his footwork, resetting to the center. You would only wish that a guy who's been in the fight game for as long as he has now, for him to pick up on those things. and initiate clinches when he gets into danger. But OSP, man, he doesn't have the best sensibilities at all times in the cage. Just taking a look at the last few of his fights here. I got TKO'd by Tanner Boser. Great fight by Boser there. And then Jamal Hill. But got a great win over Alonzo Menafield, which of course has aged well. And Mikhail Olegchaychuk, which I think is still a pretty good win. Because he got the Von Prue choke. I mean, from a betting perspective here, like, you just got to go either Ovince St. Preux by submission or Nzechukwu by TKO decision. Those are the only two options in this fight here. Ovince St. Preux, I don't really see him winning the decision here unless he goes full grappling game plan and just looks to get control and try to have top control and then gain a submission off of that. But yeah, Ovince St. Preux has a chance to get the upset here because I believe he is the current underdog. So Ovince St. Preux should be able to get the upset here. I don't know, but being 30 years old, I think Kennedy Nzechukwu is going to be the hungrier dog in this situation, and he's going to be probably the best Kennedy Nzechukwu we've ever seen. Because Kennedy Nzechukwu fights for his sick mother, so he's got a big thing to be fighting for in there. I know that he takes this very, very seriously. Losing to a guy like Dustin Jacoby in his last fight, that's not a bad loss to have. Dustin Jacoby's a very talented fighter. I was worried for Kennedy in that fight, but he's shown to be able to control these guys like Devin Clark, Ion Cutelaba, Carl Roberson, and I don't see Ovince St. Preux necessarily having the technical abilities to be more outstanding than those guys, except for in his submission ability when it comes to the Ovince St. Flu choke. But yeah, I'm going to go with Kennedy Nzechukwu in this fight. But at light heavyweight, the toss-up fights become even greater toss-ups, if that makes sense. Bryan Battle versus Angelusa. I haven't seen Angelusa much, to be honest. So I'm going to go with Bryan Battle in this fight. Simply off of I know him better, so I'm not going to really pick Angelusa. But Bryan Battle, I think, is a decent enough welterweight fighter. This is a very dangerous fight with this guy Angelusa. Yeah, I'm just going to go with Bryan Battle in this fight. Sorry I don't have much reasoning for it, but I just got a feeling Bryan Battle, what is his name? Yeah, coming off of a good win over AJ Fletcher, showing that he's learning the game, being a student of the game. He's really dedicated himself to doing this as a career. So I'm going to go with Bryan Battle in this fight. Angelusa, he might seem like an intimidating physical specimen, with those big traps. But let's see how he wears over 2 or 3 rounds. And I got Bryan Battle in this fight. Next up, the heavyweight main event between the two fat potatoes, the two best fat potatoes in the heavyweight division, Marcin Tybura. God dang, he's 38 years old. I had no idea. Wow. He's 38 years old. Apparently everybody's talking about how good Marcin Tybura looks for this fight. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I do like Tybura. Tybura is a G. Yeah, his last fight was the Tom Aspinall loss, which is a tough loss. And then before that, a solid win over Blagoy Ivanov. And then before that, a solid win over Alexander Romanov. So, I mean, Tybura is a very decent... He's a more than decent heavyweight. But Tai Tuivasa, being the younger gun in this scenario, I think he's really going to give Marcin Tybura hell. And I think after Marcin getting chin-checked by Tom Aspinall it might be time for Marcin to hang up the gloves if Tuivasa can connect and do the same. I mean, at the end of the day, it's so easy to just say, like, Tuivasa connected on Gan, he's going to connect on Tybura. So you would only hope that and think that Tuivasa could do that. And I mean, hell, this is what we pay Tuivasa to do, right? Yeah, you're a fat potato, but you bang fat potatoes. And you're the best of the fat potatoes. So, and who doesn't love Tuivasa, right? So it may be sort of a pick because I'm rooting for him and I want to see him happy in the interview and whatnot. But he's the young gun. He's 8 years younger than him. You know, let's see Tuivasa get in there and get some momentum going. Because, hey, Tuivasa isn't going in there fighting for nothing. Because Tuivasa is coming off of, let's see, 1, 2, 3 losses right now. And none of them were pretty. All of them were finishes. So Tuivasa's got to turn around here and show that he's still got some worth and that he's the best of the fat potatoes at the heavyweight division. So, yeah, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night Fat Potato. UFC Fight Night Fat Potato between Tuivasa and Marcin Tybura. The Fat Potato card. It's going down Saturday night. Peace.